The vast emptiness of space had never felt so crowded. As the sleek Galactic Council vessel approached Earth's orbit in 2087, billions of humans watched their screens in awe. Humanity had long wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. Dr. Sixtall, the Council's chief xenobiologist, observed the humans with fascination through the ship's monitoring systems. The bipedal species showed remarkable emotional responses. Some wept, others cheered, many simply stood in stunned silence. Fascinating creatures, Sixtall noted in his log. Highly adaptable physiology, but they require significantly more rest than most spacefaring species. Nearly 1/3 of their life cycle is spent in an unconscious state they call sleep. When Earth joined the Galactic Union as a probationary member 3 months later, this peculiarity became part of the standard briefing. All alien delegations received the same warning. Humans require regular sleep cycles. Do not disturb them during rest periods. Most species found this limitation quaint. The Valerians, who required only brief meditation periods once per week, found it particularly amusing. The Krell, who never slept at all, considered it a critical weakness. Jack Ellis wasn't laughing. As the newly appointed human commander stationed on Council Hub Station Epsilon, he took his role seriously. His square jaw and steady gaze had earned him respect among the alien diplomats, even if they whispered about his sleep requirements behind his back. "You must understand," Ellis explained to the station's administrator. "Sleep isn't just a preference for us. It's biological necessity." The administrator, a tall, translucent being named Vex, waved 4 of his 6 limbs dismissively. Yes, Commander. We've adjusted all station schedules to accommodate human rest periods. Though I must say, it seems terribly inefficient." Ellis smiled tightly. "Perhaps, but you wouldn't like us much without it." That night, as Ellis slept in his quarters, an emergency drill activated. Blaring alarms jolted him from deep sleep, his heart racing as he stumbled to the door. By the time he reached the command center, the drill was over. "A simple test of emergency protocols," Vex explained. "Did we disturb your sleeping?" Ellis rubbed his eyes. "Yes, very much so." "Fascinating. You appear quite distressed from such a minor interruption." Over the next few weeks, similar incidents occurred across human diplomatic outposts. Small disruptions during human sleep cycles, environmental controls malfunctioning, unexpected maintenance, emergency drills. Each time, humans responded with increasing irritation. The Council began receiving reports of concerning behavior. A human diplomat had thrown a data pad at a Valerian after 3 nights of interrupted sleep. A human engineer had burst into tears when woken for the 5th time by a curious Krell. The most troubling report came from Trading Outpost Gamma, where a sleep-deprived human security officer had broken an alien visitor's arm when startled awake. Dr. Sixtall compiled these incidents into an urgent bulletin. Warning: human sleep deprivation leads to impaired cognition, emotional volatility, and potentially aggressive behavior. All species are advised to respect human rest periods without exception. Most heeded the warning, but across the galaxy, some viewed this human weakness with contempt rather than caution. On Council Hub Station Epsilon, Commander Ellis finally enjoyed a full night's uninterrupted sleep, unaware that his biosigns were being carefully monitored and recorded by an unseen observer. In the shadows of diplomatic goodwill, the first seeds of conflict were already taking root. 5 years after Earth joined the Galactic Union, tensions were rising. The Nulvaran Empire, a militaristic species from the Outer Rim, had been expanding their territory with alarming speed. Unlike most Council races who valued diplomacy, the Nulvarans respected only strength. Lieutenant Kate Morgan stood at the viewport of the diplomatic shuttle approaching the Nulvaran border station. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion from the 3-day journey. "First time meeting a Nulvaran?" asked her pilot, a veteran of these missions. Morgan nodded. "I studied them extensively, but never in person." Well, remember they don't sleep like we do. They cycle through short rest periods while remaining partially alert. Makes them think we're vulnerable. The Nulveran station loomed ahead, all sharp angles and intimidating weapon arrays. As Morgan disembarked, she was met by a Nulveran official whose gray-scaled skin glistened under the harsh lights. His vertical pupils narrowed as he looked down at her. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said, voice like gravel. "I am Overseer Craddock. Your quarters are prepared according to human requirements." Morgan detected the slight note of contempt, but maintained her diplomatic smile. "Thank you, Overseer. I look forward to our discussions." That night, Morgan was awakened by a subtle vibration beneath her bed, too subtle to be an accident. The next night, small temperature fluctuations disrupted her sleep cycle. By the third night, she was alert enough to notice the barely audible high-frequency sound pulsing through her quarters. During daylight meetings, she noticed Nulveran scientists observing her with unusual interest. When she excused herself to use their data terminals, she carefully placed a small device beneath the console, a Union intelligence tool disguised as decorative jewelry. What she discovered sent a chill down her spine. The Nulverans had been studying human sleep patterns extensively, collecting data from across the galaxy. They were testing methods to disrupt human sleep without detection. Morgan took her findings to the council representative stationed on the border, a Valerian diplomat named Trisk. "You understand how serious this is," Morgan pressed. "They're weaponizing our need for sleep." Trisk's translucent skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "Lieutenant, the Nulverans are naturally curious about biological differences. I'm sure you're overreacting due to your sleep-deprived state." "This isn't curiosity," Morgan insisted. "They're developing something specific, a subspace frequency that disrupts human sleep patterns without affecting other species." "What possible use would such technology have?" Trisk asked, dismissing her concerns. That night, Morgan couldn't sleep at all. She used her secure channel to send an urgent message to Earth Command and Commander Ellis. "Ninolvaran RECRSH into sleep disruption TCE nanology. Possible military application. Request immediate extraction." As the message transmitted, Morgan didn't notice the subtle fluctuation in the communication array. Her message had been intercepted. The next morning, Overseer Craddock greeted her with unusual cordiality. "I trust you slept well, Lieutenant." "Perfectly, thank you," she lied. Craddock's lipless mouth stretched into what might have been a smile. "Excellent. We Nulverans find your species fascinating. So much potential, yet so much time wasted in unconsciousness." Back on Earth, Commander Ellis received a heavily redacted version of Morgan's message. All mentions of sleep disruption technology had been removed, leaving only a routine diplomatic update. Meanwhile, in a secured laboratory deep within Nulveran territory, scientists perfected their subspace emitter. The preliminary tests showed that humans exposed to the frequency could be kept awake indefinitely, their mental functions deteriorating within days. "The sleeping giants will never know what hit them," the lead scientist reported to Nulveran High Command. "They'll be too exhausted to fight back." The attack came without warning. 3 human colony worlds near the Nulveran border went silent simultaneously. Earth Command scrambled to establish contact, but only static remained where thriving settlements had existed just hours before. Admiral Greg Foster stood before the Emergency Council, his weathered face grim as satellite imagery appeared on the main screen. Nulveran warships surrounded each colony, but something was wrong with the human defenders. Instead of organized resistance, the footage showed erratic movements, confused responses, and in some cases, colonists fighting each other. "Proxima B fell within 12 hours, Foster reported, his voice tight. "We've received fragmented transmissions from the other colonies, but they don't make sense. Our people sound confused, disoriented." Defense Minister Alan Patel leaned forward. "Biological weapon. No signs of conventional pathogens. Foster replied. But survivors report the same symptom. None of them could sleep for days before the attack. They described hallucinations, paranoia, and complete inability to make rational decisions. In her lab at Earth Defense Headquarters, Dr. Samantha Wells analyzed the limited data. The pattern was unmistakable. A subspace frequency had been directed at the colonies for nearly a week before the physical attack. It matched perfectly with brainwave disruption patterns that would prevent human sleep. "They're weaponizing our need to sleep," she told her team. This frequency prevents the brain from entering sleep cycles. After 72 hours without sleep, human cognitive function drops by nearly 80%. After 5 days, hallucinations begin. After 7, we become useless, her assistant finished. Wells nodded grimly. Worse than useless. Dangerous to ourselves and others. At Proxima B, the Nulvaran ground forces found little resistance. Most colonists were either wandering in confused states or had collapsed from exhaustion. Those who tried to fight displayed erratic, sometimes suicidal tactics. Colonel Freynak, leading the Nulvaran forces, recorded in his battle log, "The humans become primitive creatures when deprived of sleep. Some begged to be allowed to rest. Others attacked with bare hands against armed soldiers. This strategy is more effective than any conventional weapon." Back on Earth, Admiral Foster initiated Emergency Protocol Waking Giant. It was a contingency plan developed after Lieutenant Morgan's warnings had finally been taken seriously. Too late for the border colonies. "Begin production of the neural inhibitors," Foster ordered, "and wake up the insomniacs." Dr. Wells worked frantically in her lab. The neural inhibitors were experimental technology designed to shield the human brain from the Nulvaran frequency. But they were untested and potentially dangerous. "We need more time," she protested when Foster demanded immediate deployment. "We don't have more time," the Admiral replied. "We've lost contact with the outer defense fleet. The Nulvarans are moving faster than we predicted." In the medical wing, a specialized unit of soldiers lay in induced comas, their brains being subtly rewired. These were the volunteers for Project Insomniac, humans genetically modified to function without sleep. The procedure was experimental and considered too dangerous for widespread use, but desperation had changed the equation. The Nulvaran High Command celebrated their initial victories. Their lead scientist, Dracus, received the Empire's highest honor. "The humans will surrender within weeks," Dracus promised. "Their weakness is their undoing." Yet even as he spoke, Dr. Wells made a breakthrough. The countermeasure wasn't perfect, but it could block enough of the frequency to allow for limited sleep. And in the medical wing, the first of the insomniacs opened their eyes. Soldiers who would never need to sleep again. The Nulvarans had broken the one rule: don't wake the humans. Now they would face the consequences. 3 weeks into the conflict, the human response seemed disorganized and ineffective. The Nulvaran advance had claimed 7 colony worlds, and their ships pressed deeper into human territory each day. Sleep disruption fields preceded every assault, leaving defenders disoriented and helpless. In his war chamber on the Nulvaran flagship, High Commander Zarek reviewed the battle maps with satisfaction. The gray-scaled general turned to his assembled officers, his vertical pupils narrowed in pleasure. "The human resistance crumbles," he announced. "Their main fleet retreats toward their homeworld. We will have victory within the month." His intelligence officer bowed respectfully. "The sleep deprivation strategy has exceeded expectations, High Commander. Their neural systems simply cannot function without regular unconsciousness cycles." Zarak was about to respond when the tactical officer suddenly straightened, his scales darkening with alarm. "High Commander, unknown vessels appearing at outposts Gamma 3 and Delta 7. The room fell silent as the tactical display updated. Small, unmarked ships had appeared near key Nulvaran forward bases. They were like nothing in the Nulvaran database, sleek, black, and emitting no standard identification signals. "Engage and destroy," Zarek ordered confidently. Within hours, reports flooded in from the outposts. The mysterious human vessels didn't fight like the others. They moved with precision, their tactics unpredictable and disturbingly effective. The outpost commanders reported that the human soldiers aboard these ships seemed different, their eyes unnaturally alert, their movements too quick. The Nulvaran research base on Proxima B sent its final transmission before going dark. They don't stop. They don't rest. What have we awakened? On the human command ship Intrepid, Captain Frank Reynolds stood perfectly still, his eyes focused but unblinking. He hadn't slept in 27 days. He would never sleep again. Reynolds was the first successful product of Project Insomniac. His neural pathways had been permanently altered, eliminating the need for sleep while preserving cognitive function. The procedure had been painful, dangerous, and irreversible. Only 30% of volunteers survived. Those who did were different afterward. "Status report," Reynolds said, his voice unnervingly calm. His executive officer, Lieutenant Patricia Burns, another insomniac, responded immediately. Nulvaran outposts Gamma 3 and Delta 7 neutralized. No casualties on our side. Sleep disruption technology captured intact. Reynolds nodded once. Deploy to the next targets. No rest periods needed. The ship's regular human crew watched the insomniacs with a mixture of gratitude and unease. The modified soldiers never sat down, never showed fatigue, and rarely expressed emotion. They worked continuously, their efficiency inhuman. On the Nulvaran homeworld, the first signs of concern began to spread through the military command. Reports from the front lines described human soldiers who fought for days without stopping, who continued advancing despite injuries that would incapacitate normal beings. "It's impossible," insisted the Nulvaran science advisor. "No sentient species can function without rest cycles indefinitely." But the evidence was becoming undeniable. The human counterattack wasn't following the predicted pattern of a sleep-deprived species. Instead, small, elite units struck with precision, targeting the sleep disruption technology first, then methodically dismantling Nulvaran defenses. After a particularly devastating raid on a major Nulvaran supply depot, security footage captured Captain Reynolds walking calmly through the burning facility. A wounded Nulvaran officer grabbed his ankle, asking in broken human language why he wouldn't stop. Reynolds looked down, his eyes unnaturally bright in his expressionless face. "You took our sleep," he said simply. "So we abandoned it. You should have let us rest." In his war chamber, High Commander Zorak watched the footage with growing horror. The sleep disruption technology, their perfect weapon, had forced humanity to adapt in a way no one had anticipated. The humans hadn't been defeated by their weakness. They had eliminated it. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as representatives from 17 species gathered for an emergency session. The curved walls displayed real-time updates of the rapidly changing conflict. Nulvaran territories flashed red as they fell to human forces. Ambassador Lisa Chen stood on the central platform, her normally diplomatic demeanor replaced with something harder. 3 days earlier, she had received confirmation that her sister's colony on Ta City had been among the first hit by the sleep disruption weapons. There had been no survivors. "Distinguished representatives," Chen began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "For 5 years, humanity has peacefully participated in this council. We shared our knowledge, our resources, and our friendship. In return, we asked for one simple consideration: respect for our biological need for sleep." The Valerian delegate shifted uncomfortably. Several council members had received warnings about Nulvaran research, but had dismissed them as paranoia. "The Nulvaran Empire chose to weaponize our physiology against us," Chen continued. "They created technology specifically designed to torture humans by preventing sleep, a form of cruelty recognized as illegal by the Council's own laws." The Nulvaran representative, newly appointed after his predecessor's mysterious disappearance, tried to interrupt. The Empire was merely defending its interests against human expansion. "You should have let us sleep." Chen cut him off, her voice dropping to an intensity that silenced the chamber. Now we are awake, fully awake, and we will remain so until justice is served. The speech would later be known as the "You Should Have Let Us Sleep" address, marking a turning point in galactic politics. Back on Earth, Dr. Samantha Wells had finally perfected her countermeasure to the Nulvaran sleep disruption fields. The neural inhibitors could now be mass-produced, allowing regular humans to sleep despite Nulvaran technology. Distribution to remaining colonies is underway, she reported to Admiral Foster. But I'm more concerned about the Insomniacs. Foster's brow furrowed. Captain Reynolds and his teams are our most effective weapon against the Nulvarans. Without them, we might have already lost this war. They're changing, Admiral, Wells insisted. The neural modifications were designed for short-term deployment, but they've been active for weeks now. Their brain chemistry is altering in ways we didn't anticipate. Reports from the front lines supported her concerns. Captain Reynolds and his squad had single-handedly captured a Nulvaran research station, but their methods had become increasingly unpredictable. Regular human soldiers described the Insomniacs as efficient but frightening, noting their lack of emotion and disregard for conventional tactical doctrine. Most troubling was the data recovered from the captured research station. The Nulvarans hadn't just been developing sleep disruption technology. They had been experimenting on captured humans, deliberately keeping them awake until their minds broke. The footage was too disturbing for general release, but copies reached key council members, shifting opinion decisively against the Nulvaran Empire. Species that had previously supported the Nulvarans or remained neutral began withdrawing their backing. The Krell, who had initially admired the Nulvaran strategy, now declared it an abomination against natural law. In her lab, Dr. Wells studied brain scans from the Insomniacs with growing alarm. The areas controlling emotion and empathy showed decreased activity, while those governing calculation and aggression were hyperactive. "We've created something we don't fully understand," she told her assistant. "The question is, when this war ends, can we undo what we've done to them?" On the front lines, Captain Reynolds stood watching as Nulvaran prisoners were processed. A subordinate approached, asking for orders regarding the next target. "No more outposts," Reynolds replied, his voice emotionless. "We go directly for their homeworld." The subordinate hesitated. "Sir, those aren't our orders from command." Reynolds turned, his unblinking eyes fixing on the soldier. "They don't understand what needs to be done. But we do. We're awake now." The human military advance moved with unprecedented speed. What had begun as a desperate defense had transformed into an unstoppable offensive. Within 5 weeks, the Insomniacs had reclaimed all lost colony worlds and pushed deep into Nulvaran territory. Commander Jack Ellis stood in Earth Command's Situation Room, watching the holographic display with growing concern. The red markers representing Insomniac strike teams were moving beyond their assigned objectives, penetrating deeper into enemy space without authorization. "We need to rein them in," Ellis insisted to Admiral Foster. "Reynolds isn't following the battle plan anymore." Foster rubbed his tired eyes. Unlike the Insomniacs, regular humans still needed sleep, and he'd had precious little lately. "Reynolds is getting results. 3 more Nulvaran systems surrendered yesterday without a fight." "Because they're terrified," Ellis countered. "Have you seen the footage from Nulvaran news broadcasts? They're calling our forces the Sleepless Ons, depicting them as monsters who never rest, never show mercy." Before Foster could respond, a communication officer interrupted. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Nulvaran High Command. They're requesting immediate peace negotiations." The room fell silent. After weeks of brutal conflict, the prospect of peace seemed almost unreal. "Put it through," Foster ordered. The large screen flickered to life, revealing High Commander Zarak. The Nulvaran leader looked diminished, his scales dull with stress. "Admiral Foster," Zarak began, his voice lacking its former arrogance. "The Nulvaran Empire formally requests cessation of hostilities. We are prepared to discuss surrender terms." Foster's expression remained neutral. "Your request will be considered," Transmit your proposed terms for review." After the transmission ended, Ellis leaned forward. This is it. The war could be over. "If Reynolds accepts the ceasefire," Foster replied grimly. They immediately sent orders to all human forces to halt their advance pending peace negotiations. Most units acknowledged and complied. The Insomniac teams did not respond. Dr. Samantha Wells rushed into the command center, her lab coat rumpled from hours of continuous work. "Admiral, I have the final analysis of the Insomniac brain scans. It's worse than we feared." She projected her findings onto a display. "The neural modifications are spreading beyond the targeted areas. Extended sleep deprivation has permanently altered their brain chemistry. They physically cannot stop now. The part of the brain that would normally impose limits is effectively offline." "What are you saying, Doctor?" Ellis asked. "I'm saying they won't recognize the ceasefire. They can't stop fighting until they perceive a total victory." As if confirming her assessment, reports began coming in from the front lines. Reynolds' fleet had bypassed the main Nulveran defense line and was heading directly for a civilian research station. When ordered to stand down, Reynolds had responded with a single message: "Sleep comes only after the threat is eliminated." The situation worsened when footage leaked across the galactic networks showing Insomniac teams conducting raids on Nulveran worlds that had already surrendered. The images were disturbing, methodical, emotionless human soldiers moving with machine-like precision through Nulveran settlements. In an emergency council session, species that had previously supported humanity now debated containment protocols. The Krell representative spoke for many when he declared, "We may have unleashed something we cannot control." Commander Ellis volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war, not fighting Nulverans, but confronting Captain Reynolds' rogue fleet. As Ellis' ship prepared to depart, Dr. Wells approached him with a small device. "This might help bring Reynolds back," she explained. "It's an experimental neural stabilizer, if you can get close enough to use it." Ellis took the device. "And if it doesn't work?" Wells didn't answer directly. "The Insomniacs were never meant to be permanent, Jack. They were our last resort in a war we were losing." "And now?" Ellis asked. "Now they might be the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. Humans who never sleep, never tire, and never stop." The Grand Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so crowded. Representatives from every spacefaring species gathered to witness the formal surrender of the Nulveran Empire. High Commander Zorak, once proud and imposing, now stood humbled before the assembly. The term scrolled across the massive display for all to see: complete dismantling of sleep disruption technology, substantial reparations to affected human colonies, and the classification of sleep deprivation methods as war crimes under galactic law. "The Nulveran Empire accepts these terms," Zarek stated, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "We offer our sincere apology to humanity for our grievous error in judgment." Commander Jack Ellis watched from his position at the human delegation table, his face bearing a new scar from his confrontation with Captain Reynolds. The mission to stop the rogue Insomniac fleet had nearly cost him his life, but Dr. Wells' neural stabilizer had worked. Barely. The memory was still fresh. Reynolds standing on his ship's bridge, eyes unnaturally alert after weeks without sleep, refusing to acknowledge the ceasefire. "They must be eliminated completely," Reynolds had insisted. "It's the only way to ensure our safety." It had taken Ellis and a team of specialists to subdue Reynolds and administer the stabilizer. Even then, several Insomniacs had resisted, their altered minds unable to process the concept of standing down. Now, as the surrender ceremony concluded, Ellis met Lieutenant Kate Morgan at the chamber exit. Her intelligence work had been crucial in the final phases of the conflict. "It's really over," Morgan said quietly. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it." Ellis nodded. "The war is over, but we have another battle ahead." Together, they walked to the newly established Human Sleep Rights Commission, where representatives from across the galaxy were studying the legal and ethical implications of the conflict. Morgan had been appointed as its first director. "How are they doing?" she asked as they approached the medical wing. Better, Ellis replied. Dr. Wells has made progress with the rehabilitation program. Inside the quarantine facility, the surviving insomniacs underwent treatment to reverse the neural modifications. The process was slow and painful. Some might never fully recover the ability to sleep normally. Frank Reynolds sat in a specially designed chamber, neural stabilizers attached to his temples. His eyes, once constantly alert, now showed signs of fatigue, a positive development, according to Dr. Wells. He recognized me today, she told Ellis and Morgan. Asked about the war. It's the first time he's shown interest in anything beyond tactical objectives. Beyond the medical wing, life in the galaxy was adapting to a new reality. Human sleep was now protected by the strongest laws in Council history. Dr. Wells received the Union Science Medal for her countermeasure development, though she accepted it with mixed emotions, knowing her work on the Insomniac program would always haunt her. In the detention center, a captured Nulvaran scientist was permitted to observe the recovery ward as part of his rehabilitation. He watched through the window as human soldiers, regular ones, not insomniacs, ended their shift and prepared for sleep. "I don't understand," he said to his guard. "They appear so vulnerable when they sleep. How could such a species become so formidable?" The guard, a veteran who had fought in the early days of the war, considered the question. "That's what your people never grasped. Humans need sleep precisely because we feel and process so intensely when awake. We dream, we heal, we restore ourselves. Take that away, and you don't weaken us. You transform us into something we were never meant to be." In the recovery ward, the first fully rehabilitated former insomniac closed his eyes and fell into natural sleep for the first time in months. In his dreams, there were no battles, no enemies, only peace. Across the galaxy, a new understanding took hold. Humans were indeed unusual among spacefaring species. Peaceful, creative, collaborative, but with one crucial warning label that no species would ever ignore again. Peaceful until awakened. Let them sleep.